Hello, friends. This is Mrs. Dennis, and today we are going to continue our reading of The Wind and the Willows, and this is chapter 4 called The Wild Wood. What lies over there? Asked the mole, waving a paw toward a background of woodland that darkly framed the water meadows on one side of the river. Well, replied the rat hesitantly, that's the wild wood. We don't go there too often. Are there scary creatures there? Mole asked, trying not to tremble. The squirrels are all right, Rat replied, and the rabbits, some of 'em. But rabbits are a mixed lot. And then there's Badger, of course. He lives right in the heart of it, and wouldn't live anywhere else either. Dear old Badger, nobody interferes with him. Why, who should interfere with him? Asked the mole. Well, of course, there are others, explained the rat in a hesitating sort of way. Weasels, stoats, foxes, and so on. They're all right in a way. I'm very good friends with them. Past the time of day when we meet. But you can't trust them, and that's a fact. The mole had long wanted to meet the badger, but the water rat always had a reason to postpone the occasion. Postpone, friends, that's a vocabulary word. Badger will turn up some day or other, the rat would say. Couldn't you ask him to dinner? Said the mole. He wouldn't come, replied the rat simply. Well then, supposing we go and call on him, suggested the mole. Oh, he wouldn't like that at all, said the rat, quite alarmed. Besides, he lives in the middle of the wildwood. Well, supposing he does like it, said the mole. You told me the wild wood was all right. I know, so it is, replied the rat evasively. But he wouldn't be at home at this time of the year anyhow. The mole had to be content with this. Summer had left, taking the warmth and sweet fragrances with it. The autumn and winter days brought cold winds and glistening frost. No one thought about boating, and so, with time to ponder, the mole began to think once more of Badger. In the winter time, the rat slept a great deal. He retired early and rose late. Consequently, the mole had plenty of spare time on his hands. One afternoon, while the rat rested in his armchair before the fire, he decided he would explore the wild wood and perhaps meet Mr. Badger. It was a cold, still afternoon when he slipped out of the warm parlor. The country lay bare and leafless around him. The mole liked the country like this, stripped of its finery. And so, with great cheerfulness of spirit, he pushed on towards the wild wood. There was nothing to alarm him at first. Then, as his journey progressed, he moved into a shadowy world in which trees crouched nearer to the holes in various tree trunks, gapped like hideous mouths. The dusk descended steadily. Then the faces began. It was over his shoulder that he first thought he saw a face. When he turned and confronted it, the thing had vanished. He quickened his pace. He passed another hole, and a little narrow face flashed up. If he could only get away from the holes, he thought, there would be no more faces. He swung off the path and plunged into an untrodden piece of the places of the wood. Then the whistling began. Very faint it was when first he heard it, but somehow it made him hurry forward. Then the pattering began. He thought it was only falling leaves at first. Then, as it grew, he knew that it was the pat, pat, pat of little feet. The mole began to run. He ran up against things. He fell over things. At last, he took refuge in the hollow of an old beech tree. Terrified and exhausted, the mole lay trembling. Meanwhile, the rat, warm and comfortable, dozed by his fireside. It was not until a coal in the fire slipped and spin up in spurt of flames that he awoke. He immediately looked around for his companion, but the mole was not there. He listened for a time. The house seemed very quiet. Then he called, "Moley!" several times, and receiving no answer, got up and went out into the hall. The mole's cap was missing from its peg. His Wellington boots were also gone. The rat left the house and found the mole's tracks leading straight to the wild wood. The rat stood in deep thought. Then he re-entered the house, strapped a belt around his waist, and shoved a brace of pistols into it. Finally, he picked up a stout cudgel and set off for the wild wood. It was already getting towards dusk when he reached the wood. As he moved among the trees, the rat looked about for his friend. Here and there, wicked little faces popped out of holes, but vanishing immediately at the sight of such a well-armed creature. The rat called out to his friend for an hour or more, when at last he heard a little answering cry. Guided by the sound, he made his way to an old beech tree with a hole in it. From out of the hole came a feeble voice saying, "Ratty, is that really you?" Feeble, friends, that's another one of our bold vocabulary words. The rat crept into the hole, and there he found the mole. "Oh, rat," he cried, "I've been so frightened." "Oh, I quite understand," said the rat soothingly. "We riverbankers hardly ever come here by ourselves. Surely the brave Mr. Toad wouldn't mind coming here by himself, would he?" inquired the mole. "Old Toad," said the rat, laughing heartily. "He wouldn't show his face here alone for anything." The mole was greatly cheered by the sound of the rat's laughter. "Now then," said the rat, "we really must make a start for home." "Dear Ratty," said the poor mole, "you must let me rest a while longer." "Oh, all right," said the rat. "It's nearly pitch dark now, and there ought to be a bit of a moon later." So the mole snuggled down and went to sleep, while the rat lay patiently waiting, with the pistol on his paw. When at last the mole woke up, the rat said, "Now then, I'll just take a look outside and see if everything's quiet, and then we really must be off." He went to the entrance and put his head out. "What's up, Ratty?" asked the mole. "Snow is up," replied the rat briefly, "or rather, down." The mole came and crouched beside him, and looking out, saw that a gleaming carpet of fine powder was springing up everywhere. "Well, it can't be helped," said the rat. "We must make a start. The worst of it is, I don't know exactly where we are. And now the snow makes everything look so very different." It did indeed. Nevertheless, they set out bravely. An hour or two later, they realized that they were lost. They sat down on a fallen tree trunk to rest. "We can't sit here very long," said the rat. "The snow will soon be too deep for us to wade through." He peered about him and considered. "Look here," he went on. "There's a dell down there in front of us. Let's make our way down into that and try to find some sort of shelter." So once more they plodded onward. As they searched for a corner that was dry, the mole tripped and fell forward on his face. "Oh, my leg!" he cried. "Oh, my poor shin!" "Poor old mole," said the rat kindly. "You don't seem to be having much luck today. Let's have a look at that leg." "I must have tripped over a hidden branch or stump," said the mole miserably. "It's a very clean cut," said the rat, examining it. "It looks as if it was made by a sharp edge of something made of metal." "Well, never mind what done it," said the mole, forgetting his grammar in his pain. "It hurts just the same, whatever done it." But the rat, after carefully tying up the leg with a handkerchief, was busy scraping the snow. He scratched and shoveled while the mole waited impatiently. Suddenly the rat cried, "Hooray!" "What have you found, Ratty?" asked the mole. "Come and see," said the delighted rat. The mole hobbled up to the spot and had a good look. "Well," he said at last slowly, "I see it right enough. A door scraper. Well, what of it? But don't you see what it means? Cried the rat. Of course I see what it means, replied the mole. It means that some very careless person has left the door scraper lying about in the middle of the wild wood. Oh dear, cried the rat in despair. Here, stop arguing and come on and dig. And he set to work again and made the snow fly in all directions. After some further effort, a very shabby doormat lay exposed to view. There, what did I tell you? Exclaimed the rat. Absolutely nothing, replied the mole, with perfect truthfulness. You seem to have found another piece of domestic litter. Domestic, friends, that's another one of our vocabulary words this week. Do you mean to say, cried the excited rat, that this doormat doesn't tell you anything? Really? Rat, said the mole. Who ever heard of a doormat telling anyone anything? They simply don't do it. Doormats know their place. Now look here, you thick-headed beast, replied the rat, really angrily. Keep digging if you want to sleep dry and warm tonight. The rat, using his cudgel, attacked the snowbank with great ferocity. The mole scraped busily too. Some 10 minutes later, the rat's cudgel struck something that sounded hollow. He called the mole to come and help. Before long, their efforts were rewarded. For there in the side of a snowbank stood a little door, an iron bell pull hang by the side. Below the bell, a small brass plate, where the moonlit words, Mr. Badger. The mole fell backwards in the snow. Rat, he cried, you're a wonder. You knew that if there was a door scraper, there was bound to be a doormat. If I only had your head, Ratty. But as you haven't, interrupted the rat, I suppose you're going to sit on the snow all night and talk. Get up at once and hang on to that bell pull while I hammer. Friends, that is the end of chapter 4. So, do you think Mr. Badger is home right now? That's the question that I want you to think about. And I want you to think about if you had to rewrite the ending of this chapter and write a new ending to this chapter, what would that be? Also, there are going to be some discussion questions that you're going to answer in the discussion. And I'm going to give you 2 of them right now. So I want you to think about which season is this chapter in. Is it spring, summer, winter, fall? And then how do you know? What do you see or what did you hear to let you know what season you chose? How does Rat find Mole in the wild wood? What does he do? How does he find him? What did you hear in the story or what did you see in the pictures to let you know how he found him? How does Rat answer Mole's question about whether or not Mr. Toad would go to the wild wood? Rat laughs heartily, and what does he say? Right? So I want you to think about that too. And the last question, how do Rat and Mole find Mr. Badger's door? What did they do to find Mr. Badger's door? Right? There was a sequence of events. Right? That's going to be important too, sequence. There was a sequence of events. So friends, that's the end of just our read aloud story. I'm going to post the discussion questions on our discussion board in Schoology, and I will talk to you soon.